Monday, January 31st. And I will ask our interim city clerk to take a roll call.
Mayor Barrett,
Present.
council members Barnacle,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Healy,
Here.
King,
Here.
McDonald,
Here.
Posake.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you very much. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll say it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. And this evening we have interpretation in Spanish provided by Mariana Rivarola. And I believe Mariana will make that announcement now in Spanish.
Hola, buenas noches a todos los que deseen escuchar esta reunión en español. Van a tener la opción de hacerlo haciendo clic en un globito que dice Interpreter. Y si están en sus teléfonos, hay 3 puntitos en la parte debajo, a la izquierda, a la derecha, perdón, y ahí pueden también seleccionar el idioma de preferencia y voy a estar ahí traduciendo en español simultáneamente. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are going to start our workshop, and this is the public hearing number 3 for district-based elections pursuant to Election Code Section 10010. And I'm going to ask our city attorney to kick this off.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Danley. I'm the city attorney, and it's my pleasure to start introducing this item and the team that's going to be presenting it to the council and the community. First, a couple, I guess, an apology. The staff report, it was quite a cast of us working on that, and I have to take responsibility for some of the rough formatting, and there's a scheduling error in it, as well as a date error in it that we need to correct for the council and the community members. So apologies for the formatting. Also, I want to credit, I'm taking responsibility, but I want to credit the contributions of Ingrid Alverde, Dylan Brady, the Olson Remshow attorneys, and other staff, Patrick Carter. There are a lot of folks helping get this material ready and include all the information in it, including the districting partners, demographers, whom we're going to be hearing from a lot tonight. And in particular, and importantly, the schedule of hearings going forward on page 2 of the staff report. Ingrid Alverde is going to provide corrections to that because it moves up the schedule by 2 weeks. So hopefully people will be reassured that it's not going to be quite as rapid as is indicated in the staff report. The people you're going to be hearing from tonight are Elizabeth Stitt with Redistricting Partners, Tom Willis with Olson Remshow, our outside district elections counsel, is going to be available in case there are questions. Dylan Brady, assistant city attorney in my office, is also here. And next, we're going to hear from Ingrid Alverde, our open government and economic development director, who's going to talk about the very extensive public outreach that's been underway regarding the city's districting transition. So thanks very much, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you. And with that, I believe we are going to be going directly to our team, and that will be Elizabeth Stitt of Redistricting Partners. Tom Willis.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Quick, Madam
I think
Mayor.
Ingrid's going to talk about the outreach.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I am going to just share my screen and do a few slides just to catch us up. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, City Council members. As Eric mentioned, we've been moving at a quick pace and following new law, and want to make sure that we're clear on the schedule moving forward. So tonight is it's considered public hearing number 3, and this is our first opportunity to review draft maps that have been prepared by our demographers, with input from all the testimony we've received, both written and digital. And then our job is going to be, after testimony tonight, to review those maps and create another set of up to 3 draft maps that will be posted on February 4th in time for the second or the 4th public hearing, which will be on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And then the goal is there to whittle it down to one final map that is then posted by the 18th in time for the final public hearing on March 7th, whereby we would introduce an ordinance and a final map. And then if that goes well, we'll have a second reading of that ordinance on the 21st of March. But as requested by the council, we did set this up so there was actually one additional hearing within the scheduled timeframe we have to meet, of April 4th. So if on March 7th, we're not able to come to agreement, we have an additional week to push the discussion out. And I just want to go back and remind you, we developed branding for this effort. We wanted to make sure that the community was well aware that district elections were in process, had an opportunity to learn about that and to weigh in. So I had mentioned in December all of the ways we would reach out, and I just want to give you a summary. We've done 6 ads in the Argus. We've mailed 2 postcards citywide, one of which people should have received over the weekend or late last week. We've posted, we've installed 9 banners around town. We've distributed 500 postcards at different counters. We've put up 200 A-frame signs in our parks. We've held 2 in-person events. We wanted to have more, but unfortunately with the COVID case numbers, we've had to postpone that work. We've put up 100 posters. We've mentioned the district elections and 12 community updates. We've held 3 virtual open houses. We've sent information out through 2 water belt inserts, and we've posted about district elections 13 separate times on 4 channels each time. And then we also partnered with the public library with maps and forms, hard copies in the library. We've sent out information through the Petaluma City Schools newsletter. We've reached out through our partners, faith communities, the Family Resource Center, Petaluma Healthcare Center, the Petaluma Adult School, other Latino service providers, and several community leaders, especially from our ad hoc advisory committee. Several of those members participated and helped us push this information out through their networks. And as a result of all that outreach, so far we've received 6 emails, 31 web comments, 49 community of interest forms, and 22 completed maps. And I actually think there are a few more that came in over the weekend. We'll be keeping this up to date as we move forward. And all of that information we received is being posted to our website. So any maps that anyone's turned in through our map tool or that they've scanned and sent in is posted to our website at cityofpetaluma.org/district-elections. And if anyone has any additional questions or wants to provide additional feedback after the meeting tonight, you can email us at districtelections@cityofpetaluma.org or go to cityofpetaluma.org/district-elections, where you can share feedback, again, digitally through comments, through emails, etc. So with that, that completes my update on our community outreach.
Thank you. And so now we're going to turn it over to our Redistricting Partners, Elizabeth Stitt from Redistricting Partners. Okay, you're going to take that right off. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ingrid, for the doing that little introduction on how involved the community has been. I think that's really evident in this presentation. So tonight we will be going over draft maps. So not only the draft maps that we created, but the draft maps that the community has created. So on tonight's agenda, we will be going through the traditional districting principles that have guided this process. We'll go over real quickly the current census data for the city of Petaluma. Then we'll get into the community of interest testimony and how that is factored into the draft maps, all of the written testimony, all of the community submissions. Then we'll talk quickly about the public hearing schedule, or actually I don't think we're going to do that, but we will talk about the draft maps A, B, and C. And just as a reminder for City Council, the whole goal for this presentation is to get direction from you all on how you want the maps to look. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. So we have to follow certain criteria when we are drawing maps, and this is to avoid any kind of gerrymanders, to keep things above board. So first and foremost, each district that we have drawn is substantially equal in size. So we are looking at US Census population, and not just voters, not just citizens, but everyone. Then we have to make sure that the districts are contiguous. So that essentially just means that the districts are one whole piece and we're not jumping from one district over another. Then we want to be respectful of communities of interest. And we got a lot of community of interest testimony as well, which has been very helpful in this process. We also want to easily identify and understand the boundaries. So follow city, natural, and artificial and census designated place boundaries. This includes things like highways, main roads, potentially rivers, things like that. And then finally, we want to keep these districts reasonably compact. And when I say that, that just means that we're trying not to make those funny looking shapes. So this is where the idea of gerrymandering comes in. So compactness is one of the goals. So this is the city of Petaluma at large. When we break it down into the population size, we're looking at just under 60,000 folks. So the ideal size for a district is 9,974. And then when we are districting, we're looking at two different data sets at the same time. So the first one is the 2020 data set from the Census Bureau. And then we are also looking at the citizen voting age population. So this is what we look at to make sure that we are compliant with the Federal Voting Rights Act. So this tells us, and specifically these three groups that I have highlighted, those are the three most common protected classes under the Federal Voting Rights Act in California. So that is why we're highlighting Latino citizen voting age population, Asian citizen voting age population, and Black citizen voting age population.
Thank you. And Liz, this is the mayor. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I'm really happy that you actually gave the names of those three groups, because on my screen it was very difficult to see. So thank you for doing that, and I hope you will continue to do that during your presentation, just in case other people have that same issue. Thank you.
That's helpful for me to know. And for anyone at home who might be having difficulty reading your screen, you are welcome to go to the website. You can download the presentation there, and it should be easier to see the PowerPoint that way, and if it's not showing up on your screen. So the community of interest, or COI testimony to maps, this is where we essentially get the inspiration for the draft map. So first and foremost, all of this information is coming from the community. They are who drives this process, and we are following rules of the process as well. So those keeping it compact, contiguous, equal sizes. And then of course we are releasing the maps for public feedback. So in addition to getting feedback from City Council, we are absolutely hoping that this sparks a public debate as well, and we encourage public participation during this meeting as well. So just to go over the written community of interest testimony quickly, we summarized it into a few buckets. So the Washington Street corridor east of 101, this is a large Latino population, lower income, multifamily dwelling, high property values. Then we have Heritage District, downtown, Brewster, Oak Hill. People there are committed to preserving the historic character of the community. East of 101, south of Madison, bordered on the west of Sonoma Mountain Parkway, working class values centered around family. People are often busy making ends meet, and they are also engaged in the community and politically active. Then we have the Petaluma High School area. This common interests include schools, traffic, public safety, growth, development, active voters as well. And then the rural west side of town. So they are into, or they have crops, they have animals, apiaries, unincorporated area, different lifestyle values, and then the Adobe Creek Golf Course. So non-operational, affecting property values. And then we have the community submissions. So these are really exciting. I'm probably biased because I'm a demographer. So it's always really exciting to see these community-made maps. And I just want to be upfront with everyone on the council. You have the ability to uplift any of these maps and turn it into a draft map for consideration. We encourage clients to do this. We've had former cities that we've worked with, well, current cities who we formerly worked with, use city resident-made maps as their official maps. So if at any point I'm going through a map and you're interested in it and you have questions, please feel free to stop me and we can talk about it a little bit more, whether you want any to bring that up in the future. So the first one is the block districts, and you can see the name of the district or the name of the map right here. So this is block district. And then as we break it down by the census data, remember that we are trying to keep the deviation under 10%. So just looking at this one, the deviation does appear to have a deviation under 10%. And for those who just need a little refresher on how you calculate that, you look at the lowest value and the highest value. So it's 4.6 and 3.3, and you add the absolute value together. So that would be under 10%. And then we have Christina plan. So this one, again, has a total deviation of well under 10%. So the highest one is 1.7, lowest one is negative 2.7. And then we have the city of Petaluma AAH2. This one has a deviation again that's under 10%. And then this person drew just one district, which totally acceptable. So this just highlights what they think one district should look like. So this is the southern portion of the city. And the deviation, while we don't have other districts there, this is about on par for how large a district should be. And we have one plan named Districting Plan. And this one again has a deviation of under 10%. And if at any point I'm going too fast, please feel free to slow me down. And then we have, I believe it's called Dusty 122121V1. Yes. I believe
Councilmember Healy has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I was just going to comment that it would have been really nice to have had this breakdown on the citizen prepared maps before the meeting. I really am not in a position to take notes on them now, but to get the demographic breakdown, which is not even being highlighted in the population comparisons, it would have saved a lot of time, and we really should have gotten that before this meeting. So I would ask that the consultant provide those with us, but I don't know that we're going to be able to do much with them since we're just being they're being given to us now. Thank you.
Okay, well, it might be important for the consultant to point out if any of the maps that you're showing us do not fall within the acceptable deviation. And then I'm going to actually call on two other council members.
If I could follow up on that.
Sure.
So the acceptable deviation may be 10%, but I think we should be striving for something much smaller than that. I'd shoot for 1 or 2%. And I think part of the problem here is that the building blocks were too large. And if we give direction on which of these we think might be worthy of further consideration, I think we should give direction to get that deviation way down from the 8% range that they're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher, followed by Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the public, you said that, Ingrid, you said that these were available on the website, and I did go look today and couldn't find them on the website. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little more specifics about where on the website exactly we can find these.
Yeah, so we've been posting the maps as we receive them on the district elections map. If you scroll to the first orange box, it says community input, and you click over, it'll have all the lists of the submitted information. We have maps, emails, web comments, and COI forms. So we've been adding to that as we go. What we did not have is what they call the atlas, which is kind of the breakdown of each map. Uploaded, and those came with this presentation, which we then uploaded this presentation, I believe, to the agenda today.
So let me ask the city clerk if that is actually on the agenda so that people can get that right now. Karen?
Yes, Madam Mayor, yes, that is it is on the website under Granicus.
On the agenda.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So that should be helpful for people. Councilmember Fisher, did you have, okay, thank you. Councilmember McDonald?
Thank you. I too was scrambling to, and I see that now. It does take a bit to get through the breakdown. But I'd suggest that if anything doesn't meet the requirements, then we shouldn't even begin to discuss. We should thank someone and move quickly past it. And but I would concur that we are trying to get our population deviation a lot tighter than the maximum allowable. Thanks.
Okay, but I would just argue, and I haven't looked at them all either, but we might see that some have a higher deviation than we're interested in, but we may like a lot of the other aspects of that map. And we could be giving direction to say, well, we like the general feel of this map or how it looks, how it addresses the communities of interest. So can the staff work on bringing that standard of deviation down to a smaller level? But let's not jump ahead too much right now, but thank you for bringing it to staff and everybody else's attention at this point. So with that, we'll go back to the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So then we have a total deviation here. See, this one's really low. So this one has a 9% or 0.9% as the highest. And then the lowest is 1. So we're looking at 2.9. Or excuse me, 1.9. And then we have the East Petaluma map as well. And then this one, we again have a low deviation. The highest is 0.6 and the lowest is negative 0.6. Then we have the EPA map. And again, very low deviation here, well under the 10%. This is scale 1. And the total deviation here, again, under 10%, so we are fine there. And then this one is GSILLIAN Plan 2. And then this one, again, total deviation is under 10%. I believe it's about 9% here. And then here is Kevin B. 15 December. And then again, low deviation. And then here's Kevin B. 16 December. Low deviation as well. And then we have NH1. Again, deviation well under 10%, so it is fine there. And then a map called Petaluma Districting. And this one has a deviation that is too high. And again, if there are any maps that you like and the deviation's too high, we can always adjust it if you like the general shape of it. And then here is redistricting Rangi. This one's probably one of the more different ones out of the group. And the deviation is under 10%. And then we have Roy Red ICH 2. And the deviation here is really low. So we're looking at, I believe, less than 1%. And then suggestion 1. And this deviation is under 10%, though just barely. And then version 1. And we have a deviation that is over 10%. And then blocked districts. And this one is well under 10%. We also got submissions on physical paper. This is one of those. These are great just to look at shapes. and how they envision their communities coming together. They did also balance the districts. But this kind of shape is very common from what we've seen. So these are great to just see how people envision the maps. And this is created by John Shribs. And then this one is created by Jerry Rosenthal. Another one by Mr. Rosenthal. And then we can get into our draft maps that Redistricting Partners has created. Are there any questions before I go into the draft maps? Great. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, am I the only one with a hand up? All right. My question is, my understanding, and maybe I missed something at the prior couple of meetings, is that the public maps and what was being presented were being in some manner incorporated into the 3 maps that we all reviewed to prepare for tonight. Is that the case?
So we wanted the maps from the public to sort of stand on their own, and leaving it up to you all to pick a map or maps that you want to uplift. So, and I'll get into the draft maps in a moment, but the draft maps that we have created follow community verbal community of interest testimony, but we did not want to just replicate a map that has already been drawn by the public, if that makes sense.
No, that answers the question. I'm going to concur with some of my other colleagues. I didn't, before tonight, I haven't reviewed these, and to prepare for tonight, I have to say I studied these maps in some depth, and I suspect that everybody else did as well. And I just, the 20 or so maps you just showed us, there's not any way that I can logically and reasonably make any decisions or comments on those tonight. Sorry,
No, it's
I would, it would have been, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, apparently I was not the only one to miss them, but it's just new data, and this is not something to be glanced at and then make a decision or input on a decision as important as district elections. So I guess nobody might comment about this tonight, about those maps. Some of them were interesting looking, and some of them had very low deviation patterns. So it may be worth looking at some of them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on Councilmember Fisher right now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo those sentiments. If we're really being asked to uplift one of those other maps and we haven't even seen them before, it's incredibly difficult. And just knowing the standard of deviation, but also knowing, the populations and who's being represented on those maps, needing to study that as well. I want to comment on plans A, B, and C, and like Councilmember King, in studying these. It's very difficult to study them without having any underlying roadways even identified. On one, I couldn't tell where the line was. So I'm not sure, but I think there's some improvement on this process that we can do moving forward. And I don't know what it is, but I feel it needs to happen. And when you're talking about plans A, B, and C, I'm hoping you can go into some detail about your rationale and creating the plans the way you did. And I'm assuming you're going to do that. I'm hoping so. Thank you.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thanks. I think I have those same hopes that you're going to hit on things that are very concerning to us right now. I'm wondering if it's possible to array all those 18 on the screen and you extract some sort of commonalities out of them. Is that the intention of where you're headed here? Or we certainly can't be expected to remember any detail from the mapping that you showed. But if you're array 2 or 3, you can say, well, there's a trend this way or trend this way. So I'm hoping you can pull that together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our city attorney has his hand up, so let's hear from him.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. I just want to say that we, as part of this statutory timetable that we're on, there's a lot going on in terms of receiving the maps, posting the maps, initiating the analysis of maps that come in from members of the public. You are going to hear some rather detailed discussion of what went into the 3 maps that Redistricting Partners prepared, but it's clearly the case that the council and the public haven't had a chance to look at, weigh in on, see detailed analysis of the maps submitted by members of the public. And there's going to be time to do that going forward. And we're hearing the council's input tonight on how you want to be able to do that. We've heard a comment about making sure there's some key like roadway references that are visible in the maps. You saw, I think, in the staff report that that there's actually text description of the district boundaries for the 3 Redistricting Partners maps, and maybe that same information and possibly other information will be necessary regarding at least some of the maps submitted by the members of the public in which the council members are interested in. And again, clearly you need some time to digest those, and we're here to receive comments about how they need to be presented to help you do that. Ingrid, who's been overseeing the posting and the receiving and the publishing, may have some more comments about the timing issues, but I wanted to recognize that it's obviously it's the case that both the council and the members of the public are just seeing these now, and will need a chance to be helped with the analysis and a chance to consider these other maps, so it can give direction about favoring some or others, or parts of some or others, et cetera. So thank you. And I see Ingrid's got her hand up to add some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll call on Ingrid in 1 minute. It is seeming to me that I'm hearing that the council members appear to want more time with the public submittals, and I think that all of us have had a nice amount of time to go over and look at plans A, B, and C, and maybe even actually do a little site visiting. But it is, so I do think staff, I am looking forward to hearing what Ms. Alverdi has to say, but I think the idea of perhaps another workshop meeting is going to be important, or else because I don't think we're going to be able to get down to a small number of maps for the February 14th workshop as was proposed in the introduction here. So we may need something in between this meeting and that, or have a meeting there to take into consideration all the public submittals as well as Plan A, B, and C, and then have yet another meeting between the 14th and the 7th of March. With that, I'll ask Ms. Alverdi to weigh in.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to, I wanted to share my screen and walk you through how we've been posting the information, because it's been coming so quick that we've been posting to our website so that it would be as up to date as possible. But one of the things Redistricting Partners did was sent us what they call searchable links. So we can, and again, this is for going forward, but just since I have an opportunity to share, when you go to a searchable link, you can then zoom in on the map. So these are the Redistricting Partners Plan A, B, and C, and then you can zoom in and see the streets and kind of where the cutoffs are. So that was one of the primary reasons why we did a link instead of trying to attach, because we recognized that these as attachments to the staff report were very hard to read. I don't know if that helps, but I agree, we need to get these out earlier. Our software, when we post the maps, only creates a PDF with the map itself. And so those maps have been posted along the way as we pull them off as they're submitted. And so they look a little different. Their system kind of creates a different picture, but these are how we've been keeping them up to date on the website so far. And I think what I'm hearing is it would be helpful if we could work with redistricting to get that more complete map that they're able to analyze and get those up as quickly as we can.
I think you're also hearing that the council really feels it needs a specific packet of everything that has been submitted so that we can look at everything together. You know, and it's not going to be okay for us to just keep, you know, jumping around the website looking for the maps and then going back and forth. We need to have that as a specific packet. So, Councilmember Fisher.
Well, I guess I should have known better than just to look at the PDF that was in my staff report, and maybe should have gone to the website, or at least given that information that I could go to the website and get a link and find a more complete map, since I wasn't conscious about actually doing that, maybe given more direction. Yeah.
And I definitely think we could have been more clear on the links and what you could expect to see and how to pull the maps up.
Okay, so with that background, Councilmember King, sorry.
No, that's all right. I just was going to concur with the mayor's comments in terms of maybe adding a meeting, and also with Councilmember Fisher's comments. I'm sorry, I had no idea I could find those on the website. And I don't know if anybody else on the council did. No, maybe somebody did. I mean, my impression was this was going to be incorporated into a discussion on the 3 plans in front of us that were in the staff report. And then, you know, public comment on those plans and maybe adjustment of those plans. And while I also think it's good to look at 20 or 30 plans, I'm not sure how pragmatic that's going to be to get down to dividing the city in 6 districts that meet the requirements of the law that we're dealing with, have the deviations that are lower in terms of population, and you know, have a decent geographical balance. So I'd also say, you know, one of the things, and I don't know if this is the answer, but way back when we would have planning, we would get these huge pieces of paper that actually you could fit things on that adult human beings can read relatively easily. These are not easy. I mean, even in my own neighborhood, I had to go through and go, oh yeah, there's that street, there's that street. Going into other neighborhoods where it wasn't marked as well, you know, I was okay because I know a lot of the streets, but I think for people in the public who aren't going to spend the time maybe that we're going to spend, it should be easier for them too, because they're the ones who are going to provide the input for us. And the more difficult it is for them to look at these maps, the more frustrated they're going to be. So those are my comments for the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's go back to the presentation with all these caveats in mind, and let's see what we can learn. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And again, we want to make this as public friendly as possible. So I'm sure I'll be working with the city to get this as accessible as possible. So let's get into draft maps A, B, and C. So for all of these maps, the whole goal was to reduce the amount of neighborhood splits, use major streets and highways to be dividing lines. So you'll see for map A, Highway 101 is a divider, Lakeville Highway is a divider, and East Washington Street. These are the predominant boundaries. And then we have a total deviation of 7.8 here. Map B, again, using major streets and highways as dividers. And again, you can read all of the different splits and areas on the website for folks who are at home and want to download the presentation. And then you can see that this one is split differently. We are not using East Washington. It's going into this area, but still using Highway 101 as a divider. And then Lakeville into Bodega as a divider.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, and Liz, could I ask a quick question? I'm wondering if it might be helpful for the council and maybe for the public as Liz is going through this. Liz, if you also were to talk a little bit about some of the demographic data that went into making up the A, B, and C districts. If that's not the case, Madam Mayor, I apologize, but I'm checking.
I was allowing her to go forward, assuming she might be layering, first of all, giving us the geographic thinking, and perhaps adding that. But yes, if you're not doing it that way, I think that's good advice from our city attorney.
Great. So let me get into the census data. So here again, we have a deviation under 10%, so it's at 6.2. When we break it down by the citizen voting age population, then we are looking at how influential these different demographics are in an election. So that's why it's important to make sure that we are monitoring that. As the Latino CVAP is the highest out of all the protected classes in the city of Petaluma. And you can see that District F is the highest out of all of those. So 17.8. And then I'm just going to go back and show you all District F. So this one.
So can you just restate what it is you were saying about that district, that what is the greatest in that district?
That is the Latino citizen voting age population. So that is the district with the highest protected class percentage voting power.
Okay, thank you.
And so that is map B. Oh, yep. Question?
Yeah, you said the highest, you're talking about just within Plan B?
Yeah.
'Cause I have to check my notes here, but I'm fairly sure I saw a higher percentage in one of the other plans in a couple of
Oh, I'm
them.
sure. Yeah, that's just referring to Plan B. Let's go
Okay.
back to Plan A and take a look at that. So for map A, when we look at the citizen voting age population demographics, you can see that map or District B has a higher Latino CVAP. And then E is at 17. So let's take a look. So here's B. And then E. So if we remember during the written testimony, we did hear a lot about like higher property values, but lower income families around this area. So wanting to make sure that we are protecting community of interest. So let's go ahead to C. And again, here we are using East Washington Street as a main divider, hopping over the freeway, and Highway 101 as a divider for District B, and then Lakeville Highway as well as a divider. And then we also got testimony that the western portion, that these neighborhoods wanted to remain together. Whether we got that right or not, that is up for you all to let us know. But one of the goals is to avoid splitting neighborhoods when possible. And then here we have a total deviation of 7. And then again, looking at the citizen voting age population, we have B, which is at 18.1%. So that is the highest for this map. And let's go back and just take a look at them again. So very similar to the B in Plan B. And then just a summary of all of these maps, map A, B, and C. So you can see them back to back. Really quickly, numbering and sequencing, as you've probably noticed, all of these maps are lettered, they're not numbered. That will come at the end of the process. City Council will decide what numbers are associated with which letters. And then of course there's sequencing. So this is just the process of deciding which districts are up for election when. So clearly, City Council for Petaluma is a staggered election system. So half will be up in 2022 and the other half will be up in 2024. And of course, there are legal things to think about when you are sequencing. The California Voting Rights Act does mention this in the code, but we will get to all of that when we pick a map at the end of this process. These two things, picking a map and then sequencing, are very distinct. So we recommend for tonight to just focus on the maps, and then the last hearing we will get into sequencing. But I did want to address it, and I also want to encourage the public, if they have any preferences on sequencing, to let us know.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to interrupt you right now and call on Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I was the person who's been hawking the website, because I definitely found the link forms helpful. I'll start with a couple of comments, and then I have one sort of overarching question for Ingrid. I think for me, I really want to see the location of schools and parks on here. Other things that seem like they could be relevant are the current 100-year floodplain or sea level rise mapping or modeling. And then the other one is collision data by type. So I know in downtown there's a lot more like pedestrian incidents, whereas in certain other areas it's going to be more vehicle to vehicle. I'm just trying to see if there's any correlation there. But if I certainly want to be able to overlay some new types of data with the maps that you put out, so that we can see if there's any correlation between, you know, a community that might be more concerned about flooding or might be more concerned about, you know, a certain school issue or something. And then my other question for Ingrid is, in the outreach you were doing, what kind of common issues come up? And not so much like specific issues that a certain district might have or a specific position on it, but like issues generally. So like when I say issues, like trying to figure out like what are the things that really sort of like are citywide issues that might have different, you know, feelings about in different areas of the community.
You want me to respond to that now?
If you have thoughts
Yeah.
about that, that'd be great.
I think
Okay,
it's
yeah.
good to do it as we go. Thank you.
Okay. I'll start with the data question. Our ability to map the data along with these maps has to do with the data sets that we have in our GIS tools. We do have parks and schools. We do have the floodplain. We're looking to see if the collision data is available in our GIS, but I don't believe it is at this point. And then in terms of themes, the community of interest forums, we're really focused on asking people specific questions about what their specific community, where they saw their community and how they connected as a community. I didn't see like citywide issues, whether it be growth or traffic or that kind of thing across the board. It really, and the biggest common theme I saw was there were a lot of comments of people that didn't think that district elections was a good idea, you know, question whether or not we wanted to do that. But for the most part, otherwise, we set up the feedback to be very specific around communities of interest. And Liz might have something else to say, but I noticed when they summarized their review as well, it was really around what kinds of community interests came out, and relevant policy areas where they agreed, whether it be traffic or schools, et cetera, but not specific positions on issues. Did that answer your question?
I think so. And that's why I wasn't asking for the specific like positions on the issues, but like schools, I would say is an issue, right? And then different districts might have different points of view or might sort of fall into different categories when you get there. And that's sort of to that process. I'm just trying to figure out like what are like the main axes or issues that we're going to be like we should be thinking about when we think about like what are the dividing lines in terms of communities of interest. And so things like east-west travel, flooding, schools, park access, you know, things, traffic or street safety, things like that, I guess, are the things that come to my mind. I was just wondering if there's any other things that we just haven't heard. Because that's what I'm needing to frame this is like, what are the sort of meta issues that different parts of the community are going to come down on different sides on?
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Barnacle. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Liz, I was just wondering, and if this is helpful to council, is can we compare and contrast the 3 draft maps tonight easily without having to switch? I mean, is there a way that we can put up and give council kind of an overview, because it's really hard, I think, just to switch back and forth if there's an easy way to do that. And if that's helpful, Mayor, that might be worth having that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Before Liz answers that, I'll go to Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. And along with that, again, sort of give us your rationale for why you had lines like this on map A and why you moved them on map B and what the thought process was and why the difference. Please.
Thank you. And so go ahead, Liz.
Cool. So unfortunately, I didn't draw the maps. I wish the demographer who did was here, but I can tell you that the objective was to create maps that fulfilled all of the Fair Maps Act requirements, equal population, and followed main roads and highways. And I see we have another question.
If I could.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. A case in point would be that A and C use Washington as a divider. B does not on the east side. And so that's a distinct, you broke a rule because they're not hard and fast rules, they're guidelines. But it also extends the entirety of the east side, rather than more community of interest, I think would be both sides of Washington. Say using Maria as a quartering element rather than all the way to edge of town. Can we get a look at that? I think I noticed one of the citizen maps came in looking more like that. And
I'm sorry.
when do you break the rules and when do you not break the rules?
Okay, I'm having a little bit of difficulty as we're deciding to go forward in having this, like going down into the weeds about these 3 plans without really looking at the other ones that have been submitted by the public, for which just on quick looks, for those of us who weren't able to see all of them, as to whether or not these, we have the same questions there, or people in the audience who may have worked on those maps might want to talk about their rationale. I do think, it is important to me to know, how did those lines are convenient, but do they really provide the community of interest divisions the way we want? And that kind of content seems to me to be an important thing for me to hear or read if it had been submitted in writing before we make our decision. But I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Healy right now.
Thank you. So like Councilmember Barnacle, I did find the citizen submitted maps online, and they're quite interesting. There's a lot of creativity and a lot of thought that went into them. But I didn't have any demographic information for them, so I was really at a loss to really analyze them, and I was going to be asking for that tonight. And apparently it's been prepared, but I didn't see it earlier today on the website, so there's that. And my question to you, Madam Mayor, is in terms of us weighing in on these things, do you want us to do that in the near future, or do you want to go to public comment first? How do you want to run this?
Well, okay. I'd like to run it totally differently, actually, but where we are right now, it seems to me that if we're going to go into depth on A, B, and C, I would like to see the kinds of questions that Councilmember Fisher brought up responded to, which I'm not sure that Liz is ready to do at this point. But they're also those kind of questions are what I want to know about the locally submitted maps. And I am hoping that there are people in the audience that if someone says, I want to look at, I think one of the maps you mentioned was Dusty. I would like to look at, talk to someone about why this or that decision was made on that. Is there someone from that team here in the audience tonight? And if so, can you raise your hand? And then we could ask that person to basically act as a consultant on their map. So if that's a way of going forward, I think we can hear about maps A, B, and C. And then if anybody on the council wants to ask about other maps that we have had an opportunity to look at, we can do that. Or we can ask people who are in the Zoom audience who did submit a map to raise their hand and talk about their map, and maybe we can pull that up on the screen share while those people are speaking.
I guess my concern about that is that I don't really have enough information in front of me to ask informed questions about the citizen submitted maps because we didn't get that information in advance. So I think I agree with the comment that there's going to be a need for an extra meeting in here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Kosuke, followed by Councilmember King, and then we'll go back to our consultant.
I'll just say I was going to suggest a way to go forward right now, very similar to what you just described, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember King?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions, really. First of all, I'm gathering tonight, it's not too late for someone from the community to submit a proposed map.
That's right.
Because we had some earlier mention that there was a cutoff period in mid-January. So that's okay. And one of my other comments is that if we're going to be discussing, we can discuss tonight, but going forward, I would like to see everything in the packet, because the public who is coming to these meetings may not have submitted a map, but they're going to want to know what we're looking at when we make this decision. And I don't know how anyone from the public could have known about all these submissions unless they toured the city website. I think, and it's certainly not easy. So in part, we're making some comments and decisions on things that were not in our packet. And so going forward, I think that needs to be more complete, even if it's a lot of documentation that goes into it, so that anybody coming to just the Granicus site to look at what's on the agenda in a given night can have everything there for them to look at. They shouldn't have to search for this. And then I have a comment on splitting neighborhoods. First of all, on Plan A, B, and C, I will say one thing: nothing jumped out at me, that put me in horror at the look of the map. I mean, I've seen some, you go back and you look in the newspaper and they show you some congressional districts back in some state in the East Coast or the Midwest, and you look at some of these things and it's clear something is amiss. Nothing like that existed in plans A, B, and C. They were all reasonably contiguous and all of that. And so, but I will say that the concept of not splitting any neighborhood is going to be very difficult. In the sense of, I don't know if splitting is the right word. I know it's the word we're using, but I've seen streets literally where one side of the street is in one district and the other side is the other district. It's not a horrible thing, really, but it's a reality, and that's certainly splitting a neighborhood. In fact, one of those streets I live on, so that's partly how I noticed it. But I also noticed it elsewhere throughout the city, and I don't know that you can avoid that, quite frankly. You have to split somewhere. So the public, I'm making that comment mainly for the public when they come up and they start thinking about this. And then I had a question really for the legal staff, and I don't know if this is the right time, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is, in one of the plans we had the Latino percentages. There were two districts where the percentages were in the low 30s. I think one was 32 and one was 31. And then the next plan, there were 5 districts where the Latino population was somewhere between, I think, 22 and 26%. So is which of those two, I don't know if this is a simple answer, which of those two is in best compliance with the California Voting Rights Act? Having 2 slightly larger percentage districts, or having 5 fairly, percentage districts that are all at or above the citywide population for Latino, if that makes any sense.
It does, and if I may, Madam Mayor, Councilmember King, council members and members of the public, I think that's a good question to hear from our outside districting counsel, Tom Willis, about, based on not only the law, but his experience in both litigation and helping cities transition to districts. Tom, would you be able to address that for us?
Sure, and good evening,
Thank you.
everyone. Nice to be with you this evening. That's a very good question. I would say just a couple responses. The first, you can hear me, right? Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. The first comment about that question is that really when you are looking at when you are considering race, there are 2 considerations that you're thinking about. The first, correctly, as Councilman mentioned, is the CVRA, the California Voting Rights Act. But that really is limited to the kind of on-off switch of deciding whether to go to elections or not, go to district elections. You have already made that decision. So in that sense, in some ways, the Latino population is per district is not really as important or as a critical determining fact. The second, however, is the Federal Voting Rights Act. And that also needs to be considered when you are looking at districts. However, I think as maybe we have mentioned perhaps earlier on, the city, because of its demographics, doesn't really have a, we will keep a very close eye on it, but just looking at these districts, doesn't really have a Federal Voting Rights Act issue at play here, simply because there is no district. I mean, we have three maps here that the Redistricting Partners has drawn, and then you have 22 maps that the public has drawn. And I haven't obviously looked at all the 22, but just taking these three as an example, you don't get anywhere close to 50%, majority CVAP district for Latinos. So, and one final comment just on terms of the population, while looking at the population numbers are important, really for the Voting Rights, Federal Voting Rights Act, and even for the California Voting Rights Act, really what you want to be looking at is, as Liz mentioned, is the citizen voting age population. That is really important, because what you're saying with that data is both the California Voting Rights Act and the Federal Voting Rights Act are concerned about the ability of minority groups to elect candidates of their choice. Well, to elect a candidate of your choice, you have to be a citizen and you have to be of voting age. And so that is how you, as a piece of data, really determine the ability of a minority to elect candidates of their choice by looking at the population that they have in a particular district that is voting age and citizen available. So, or citizen that are citizens. So that's the critical number. But the difference between 18, just to kind of cut to the chase, the difference between 18 and 19 in one district really, to me, in my opinion, doesn't really change the analysis. So I think, that is something that you might want to look at when you get into sequencing, but it does not really have a legal basis of concern, the difference 1 or 2% when you're at that low of a population percentage.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So Liz, you had your hand up earlier, so maybe you'd like to go back or go forward.
Yes, so let me just pull up the screen real fast. And just as a reminder, this is an iterative process. So these draft maps are just here to get a dialogue going, to get a sense and understanding of what you all want to see. We're not experts in the city of Petaluma. That's where you all come in, that's where the public comes in. Hopefully you can let us know if there is a map that you think is just not good, let's get rid of it. Or we can get rid of all three, or we can pick one map and dive into it and change the boundary lines. So again, these were not drafted to be final maps. This is where your input comes in. And
if I could add just briefly, Liz and Madam Mayor and Council, I think, we're going to have to provide, as the council has already indicated it needs, and it's obvious that I think everyone needs, we're going to have to provide more analysis, time to look at the members of the public's maps that they've submitted. But by diving into one of our thoughts is by diving into a little bit how the ABC maps were constructed in terms of the contours, in terms of the voting age populations in them, in terms of the demarcations, in terms of the demographics. They can be a little bit paradigmatic in terms of setting up categories and considerations for looking at the other maps. There's, probably not really an infinite variety of them. There's, as we've seen, there's some things they tend to have in common just by some of the numeric constraints and the city's boundaries. So I don't think that effort is, the intent is not to downplay the maps that the members of the public worked hard on. It's instead to start the conversation, introduce the concepts, start looking at some of the factors that are going to have to be considered in the districting process in any map sort of layout, and to help move us forward in that process. And then the council will focus us as they get the necessary information and hear from staff and the public about what went into the various maps. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on back.
1 second. So with that, hoping to get feedback from you all on, in addition to all of the information, all of the analysis, were there any maps that you wanted to talk about? I can pull up on my screen right now a comparison of all three. So we can take a look. Just give me a moment to put that up. Shouldn't take long.
While you do that, I think that's going to be helpful, Liz, because it might help in flagging some of the key differences that distinguish the different map schemes, because those will be some of the choices that the public and the council will be considering.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for us, again, we were really looking at creating a district-wide or city-wide map that was easy to identify the district boundaries, and fit all of the Fair Maps Act requirements. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I believe we have a question as well.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. Yeah, just a comment to get comments started. My first look at this is I noticed the south part of town jumps across the river, jumps across 101. And so my first thought was, isn't that bad? Isn't that incongruous with our goals? And then I looked at, what does it mean for the rest of things? I don't like that, but I'm not sure that we don't have to live with that exception to the rules. And I like that map A takes Midtown and joins it across town. I can see logic applied that's an area of commonality. I think that I'm going to hold on my comments there. Thanks.
Thank you. And I was going to say that, I think putting out an idea or an observation like Councilmember McDonald just did is very, very helpful for us to think about as we're looking in and thinking about our own comments on this, and sharing them, I think, is helpful. So, but I don't think we necessarily need a response to each one. So if we could give our comments or questions in that, unless it's specifically like, why did you do A instead of B? Let's give it in that spirit. So Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I would generally agree with Councilmember McDonald that for me, A and B seem like they were more I could find more communities of interest within those two maps. C started to get a little wonky for me. In particular, the District F and in letter C, F, in Plan C, where it goes all the way out to the junior college and then all the way into the Oak Hill Brewster neighborhood. It just feels like that's, I don't think there's too many people in town that would say that that's a strong sort of community of interest line. For me, the sort of, to Councilmember McDonald's point about jumping the river there in the south end of town, to me, the piece that might give them some common interest there is both of them are sort of cut off from parts of the community based on where they're at, right? So they, if you're on the east side, you're going to have to go down Lakeville Street to get to D Street to go across town, and if you're in Quarry Heights, you have to go down the boulevard to get to D Street to go over to the east side. So there's some sort of common transportation challenges there that might link them. And then, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. But for me, there was some commonality for me, the one that I could find the most in so far was Plan A, in terms of being what I felt on the right track.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy, followed by Vice Mayor Kosake.
Thank you. So just limiting myself to the consultant generated maps, to me at a first glance, I think A is the one that is preferable for a few reasons. And I just respond to Councilmember McDonald's comments about straddling the highway. That certainly caught my eye as well. But if you look at the segment of District F in Plan A, east of 101, it's really just 2 apartment complexes over there. And the rest of it is industrial land and our wastewater plant and Schollenberger Park. So it's a huge expanse of territory with very few people. I also like that District E within Plan A merges or combines all of the mobile home parks along North McDowell and over the highway. I think that's a community of interest that should be respected. And then finally, Plan A seemed to score highest in terms of creating 2 districts with the highest level of Hispanic voters compared to the others. And even if it isn't a requirement under state or federal law, it seems to me that would show good faith towards meeting the intent of moving to district elections. So I say that without prejudice to being open to any of the citizen submitted plans once I've had a chance to look at the demographics for those. And then the other comment I made, because I'm circling back to something I said earlier within Plan A, B and A are the most overpopulated districts, and F is the lowest. And you could easily move a couple blocks out of B and A and put them into F without doing great violence to the boundaries involved. You don't quite respect the natural boundaries as much, but as I said before, I think we should shoot for getting a lot better than 7 or 8% deviation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Kosake, followed by Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. I also prefer Plan A to B and C. And for some of the same reasons that have been mentioned, the one I would add is that I favored the maps that I see that don't stick to Washington or Bodega and East Washington as being a dividing line. I like the ones that look more like an onion centered on 101, where you know, as in A, where you have D and A being the parts of the east side further than E and B. I think in terms of neighborhoods, that makes more sense in several different ways in addition to other statements, but I also prefer map A. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher, followed by Councilmember King.
Thank you. Just general comments on the ABC maps. I also preferred A. It's not my preference overall, but in terms of these 3, it would be my preference, except for the fact that Corona Station is in D as opposed to E. I think that carving that out over for D and not having those residents across the street from the future Corona Station in the same district doesn't make any sense to me. And I really actually prefer some of the citizen maps and am anxious to get more information about the demographics in those maps. I think in terms of the citizen maps, the ones I don't like are the ones that have one district running along the eastern border. I prefer to see them sort of divided more like A versus the one on the border, but look forward to hearing from the public and getting more input on who submitted a map and why, their rationale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember King, followed by Councilmember Barnacle again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I can tell you my thought process through this started out with ranking the three maps in order of preference as CBA, but the more I studied and looked at the charts and you know, formulated a more definitive opinion, it flipped completely to ABC. But I'll make some comments about, so I do, you know, out of those three, and I will say this, I'm not wedded to, you know, the map as presented. I do want to hear from the public. I do want to incorporate the maps that have been submitted to whatever degree, if it means moving around some pieces here or there to make it even stronger. But to Councilmember McDonald's comment about the split in F on Plan A with the freeway and the river, at least according to one of the, I think it's either attachment 2 or 3 to our packet, which had the population blocks. I think the population in the section of District F, that is on the eastern side of the highway, is about 800 people. So compared to maybe 94 or 9,300 on the other side. In addition, District E on Plan A is split by the highway as well, pretty much right down the middle. And that goes to my earlier comment. I don't think the demographer, you know, or the city or the people in the city are going to be able to avoid some of that. And I think we just have to try to soften it as best we can when we do our neighborhoods. But my reason for thinking that A is probably the best of these three and maybe formulate the one to work with is similar to some of the other comments. And one of them is it's that 2 of the districts, B and E, have the highest Latino population of any district elsewhere. The other piece of, you know, what is a neighborhood and what, you know, I think the true reality in Petaluma is people have quite a bit in common, whether, you know, they're in one side of a district or another or an adjacent district. And the other thing is going forward, nothing about living in any district that gets landed on is going to preclude a citizen from contacting the entire council. And so, well, that's not really a consideration. It's probably a reality of being in local office in a small city, and I think it should continue. So those are my comments. I think that Plan A also probably did the best job of geographic contiguousness as well, although, you know, B wasn't bad there either. But anyway, those are my comments from now. Hopefully, so my preference out of those three just to work with is Plan A.
Thank you, Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. This is a question maybe for Councilmember Healy, but really for anyone. I've heard a couple people say that we want to get as close as we can on deviation. And some of the things that I've heard from folks in the community is like, I prefer not to be standing on one side of my street and then looking on the other side of my street. It's like you know, like that's, you know, whose pothole is it type of a thing from standing on 2 sides of the street. And so I guess I'm less concerned about having a 7% deviation than a 2% deviation. And I'm just wondering what the rationale is for that. Because to me, probably more important is that, you know, if there is someone that has a district that has more, that there's some rationale for it, and we're not just carving off a little piece and putting it in
Thank you for that question. I'm going to give Councilmember Healy a moment here if he would like to respond directly to that question about what your thinking is about keeping the standard deviation as small as possible.
Well, I think we want to make sure everyone has equal voting rights in the community. That's the main thing. And I think if we give this direction to the team, that try to sharpen your pencils and do a little bit better on the population differentials, I'm quite convinced they'll come back with something that can do a lot better without doing violence to the maps that we see right now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd concur that the final population counts are the last thing that'll get crafted into this. There's major issues early and first, and I appreciate everybody pointing out the limited population below Lakeville East, and that was why I got over that initial Rorschach of having it so oddly. But I would like the public to weigh in on whether the east side, let's say map B, District C, whether east and west, both sides of Washington is a good idea or not a Washington feel, which I think of as the Washington corridor and a good thing to keep together. I'll also like the public to weigh in on map A, or District E, where Midtown is pushed into that freeway corridor district there, whether Midtown going to the east side, whether the public feels good about that, because there's pros and cons to all that. I do like that it has mobile homes all into the same district. And I do know that the Latino CVAP for the District A has 2 districts of 19 and 17%. B has 18 and 15%, which is pretty close to, but the third one just has 1 district at 18, and I find that we can do better than that C map for that criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so unless staff has something more, was there more presentation involved, Liz, here? Or do we want to go to the public? I guess that's what I want to find out from our consultant.
Yep, that's the presentation.
Okay.
Please feel free to go to the public.
Yeah, don't wrap up your slides, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to ask you to pull up some of the things that the public have provided for us. So with that, I'm going to ask our interim city clerk if she's received any correspondence on this item.
Madam Mayor, we did receive 1 public comment, which was posted to the agenda.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in our Zoom attendance, which at this time is 25 people, to see if there's anyone who would like to speak to these items. And I would ask that if people are going to speak and they are associated with any of the submittals, if they could identify their submittal, to please let us know which one it is. And I think while we can give everybody 3 minutes, we might want, if there's, because this is a workshop and we're not able to be in public, we have to figure out how this is going to work best on Zoom. We would see if there's time for, if there's anyone on the council who has any questions about a specific map that I will ask staff to bring up for us, which I don't know how you're going to share the screen with the time and the maps, but that's someone else's job. So with that, we will go ahead and see if our moderator can see who is interested in speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And perhaps a suggestion for that would be to have public comment first, and then potentially go back to the maps and have people talk to their maps if they'd like to. So now would be public comment for themes and feedback that they've want to give to the council from the discussion that's happened, and then we could potentially reopen it just for going back over the maps. I think that's the way I can share my screen, and Liz can share her screen at different times and make it work.
I think that sounds great, and hopefully we'll be able to do that with reminding people that once they're speaking now, that we will ask them to come back on after general public comment. So let's hope that works. Okay, thank you for that suggestion.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom. You'll be called on in turn and have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. The speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from the meeting. And please stick to the topic on hand, which is district elections. So our first speaker is Recusin, followed by SK. Recusin, you may unmute and begin your comments. Are you there, Recusin?
Oh,
there we go.
My
Okay.
apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, terrific. Just a couple questions, notes while we heard the talking here regarding the districting consultants. Just curious, this could be a blurb appended to the maps, but the research they did into Petaluma, besides demographic information and database information, especially anything about if they had people on the ground, anyone in Petaluma that was consulted with in creating the maps, and then of course the logic behind the difference between A, B, and C. Just give us in the public a good frame of reference to maybe ask better questions and be better at analyzing maps. Also just curious about their influence in the process. We know there are a lot of public maps, and they did say they would kind of allow the city council to elevate one of the public maps into their kind of ring of choices. I'm just curious, is that that process? It would seem to me that the council's relationship would be kind of elevated, and if they wanted to do all public maps and kind of push aside the consultant maps, they could. So just curious about that relationship, if they have any influence in the process, or if I'm just misreading that. Also, just the cost of the consultants, if there's any information about that. Of course, we talked about the public maps. Again, it would be great, and it sounds like we're going to hear from people regarding some of the public options, but on the website, if those could be posted in kind of the same area where A, B, and C are as kind of equivalent choices. And then a big question, but the districting in general, how far this effect extends beyond just voting for council members. Are we going to see different tax funding and expenditures in different areas? Are the CAFRs, comprehensive annual financial reports, going to be separated by district? Some of the bigger questions like that, what kind of influence will that have? Because of course, some areas may need more infrastructure development than others. Some areas may contribute more property tax. I'm just curious how the redistricting will affect considerations like that. And I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Recusin. Our next speaker is SK, followed by Janice Cater Thompson. SK, you may unmute and begin your comments.
This is Susan Kirks, SK. I'm away from my computer, so I'm calling in tonight and watching you via Zoom. I have a couple of comments and questions. This is a little bit of a troubling process. The city has certainly claimed, to be out in the community and doing all these workshops and sending notices. But honestly, the public maps that have been posted, this is the first time that I am aware of the posting. I would like time to study those. The population information was not presented until I believe tonight. I think the comments by all of the council members have been really spot on. I like Councilmember Barnacle's suggestion about the overlay of relevant quality of life and community information so that it can be observed with the district maps. And also, I would like to know specifically what's the deadline for submitting more information, because after tonight, I am certain there are community members who will want to delve more deeply, even though we thought we had delved deeply. So what is the timeline, please, for submitting additional maps from the public? Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Susan. Our next speaker is Janice Cater-Thompson, followed by Rick Dusty. Janice, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Great, thank you. I will say that working with the district mapping was not easy. Fortunately, the group that I worked with had somebody who really could work through that process, and I probably could not have done it on my own. But with that, we submitted the EPA or the East Petaluma map. And, you know, when I'm looking at the 3 maps that the consultants submitted, I kind of like map A better than the EPA or East Petaluma map. But the one thing, my concern was that the smart station was not included in the way that map A is. And I think that's really important because of the people in the mobile home park. But one thing we did with the EPA map is we took it on the right side of, from Corona north to Old Redwood Highway. On the right side, we added that into that district. Well, unfortunately, I can't see the map A on the screen, and I can't get a double screen. And the reason that we did that is because we felt as though, because the amount of pollution, truck traffic, car traffic on McDowell, that gave a representative the ability to actually work with other representatives. And so what we were looking at is on the west side, connecting that with downtown. And we were thinking because of the way Commerce is. And then I talked to some other people, and now I have kind of another feeling about that. So I'm not wed to that, but I think it was a good suggestion connecting downtown with the Commerce area up north, especially if the SMART train eventually gets going. You have Lagunitas on one side, and then you have Hen House and other businesses that you can interconnect. But at this point, my preference, I believe, is map A. And within the group, we are good with that. But I think we would like to add the SMART station in, and possibly the east side of Old Redwood Highway, let's just call it the Lagunitas side, in with that, our district, or the district, I don't know which one it is on your map. On our map, it's showing number 2. And so it would be great if you could pare down to X amount of maps you really want to look at, get rid of the ones you don't want to work at, so we can actually, a decision can be made. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer. And then there's other people on with this group that can also answer questions. So that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Janice. Our next speaker is Rick Dusty, followed by Alex DeCarly. Rick, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, good evening. So my map is under my own name, and I don't have any pride of authorship. So I will say that map A probably did the closest to what I was trying to do in the design of my map. I really support the fact that 2 of those districts had, 32, 31% of the protected class of just Hispanics, not counting the Asians and and Black. And the number is pretty much the same when you get down to voting age. It was 17 and 18. Problem I see with B was pretty much, it was straight across the board. I mean, we're going to district elections, among other things, because of the protected class. And then they have an even amount in all the districts. Doesn't really do anything other than just have a smaller block of people that are voting for the candidates. So I think having a larger percentage in certain districts makes sense. C had a little bit of the same issue. It had, zone B with a large protected class, but the rest of them were all about the same range. And as some of the council members mentioned, it was kind of strange the way they had some of the districts drawn out. So anyway, if you want to talk, in the next section about more specifics of what I did, as I said, I don't have pride of authorship. What I did do is I did jump 101 with the group there, sort of across from the fairgrounds, and then the group on the east side of the highway, kind of south, I guess that'd be east really, but southeast of Washington, because that was a large Hispanic group. And I was trying really hard to get it down where the differential wouldn't be very high. I think my differential was less than 2, where Plan A is 7. But if we're happy with a 7.8% differential, Plan A looks like it would kind of do the same thing. Just one quick comment on the consultants. You may want to talk offline for such an issue. That's probably one of the most important issues that's faced Petaluma. To not have their demographer here to be able to explain their maps just blows my mind. And the fact that they say they didn't even look at any of the public maps, and I'll tell you, putting those maps together took a long time. There was a lot of work to try to get those numbers to equal out. Is mind-boggling. So you may want to have a little discussion offline with a couple of those issues. So anyway, if you have any other questions, I'll stay on the line, and thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Our next speaker is Alex DeCarli, followed by Zaira. Alex, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Evening, is my mic on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, Council. My name is Alex DeCarli. I think districts do not give equal representation. They do not promote opportunity within the community. In fact, districts will hinder equality and representation by taking away the ability for a Petaluman citizen to run for council simply because they might live too close to an already sitting councilman. Is not everyone already equal in Petaluma? How do you bring a community together when you divide them up into sections or districts? How do some of the current council members plan to run again when several of them live within 5 minutes of each other? This is nothing but divisive language and policy. You are telling people that they are different, and that creates resentment. This encourages people to identify themselves by their district rather than as a Petaluman, which is what we all are. Petaluma is not so large that we need to be divided up. We're a proud small town, and with times as tough as they are for everyone, what we really need to do is come together, not the opposite. Don't carve up our town. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Alex. Our next speaker and currently last speaker is Zaira. Zaira, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, everyone. It's Patrick. I just want to say that I appreciated every council member's questions. That was very helpful. I will also have to admit and just provide some feedback about the consultants. It was a little confusing to follow. However, I will say that I had the opposite experience navigating the city's website. I do have to give kudos to the city staff because I was actually able to look at the links. But again, that's probably me knowing that I am an engaged community member. As you can see, your feedback, if you look at your community interest forms, a lot more people had more participation there than they did with the maps. So that is something to highlight. I don't love or hate these maps. I will have to agree that I think plan map A or B seem to be the closest, given that the Latinx population is pretty scattered. I myself had to let go of the equity-driven piece just because it's actually hard within Petaluma to do so. So if you look at A and B, based on what you all have already discussed, that's probably the closest one that will get the Latinx representation. And then the final comment that I wanted to make was moving forward, I know this is probably going to be the next 10 years, that it would be good to do a advisory committee to help with the mapping, just like the county did. I think having voices on there would probably better prepare and help council navigate these types of conversations. I understand that this is under time constraint, but that's just something to think about for any current city council members or any future candidates wanting to run for city council, that I think an advisory committee can help with this equity-driven process the next time around. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Zaira. Our next speaker, more hands got raised. Our next speaker is OK, followed by Ali Gaylord. Oh, OK's hand went down. We'll go and back up. Okay, you may unmute and begin your comments, OK.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi. My name is Undine, and I submitted one of the maps or worked with a group that did on the east side. And I guess I was a little confused about the process insofar as tonight, when we came to this meeting, I want to first echo a lot of the sentiments I've heard in public commentary, but I thought the process tonight was going to be to look at all of the public submissions. I had no idea there was even going to be a consultant submission of A, B, and C, so that was surprising to me. And then secondarily, with the communities of interest forms, I didn't know if those were in lieu of submitting a map or in addition to submitting a map, or how that was supposed to work. And then given all the map submissions, I'm also not clear on whether or not how the decisions around the submitted maps is going to take place, much like district elections. Is it going to be a ranked choice voting system around the maps, or exactly what is the process in this next meeting that looks like it's going to take place? I guess I'm just wondering how that's going to move forward. But I just really appreciated a lot of the hard work that people put into it, specifically people who've lived here for a long time and are really familiar with the city. And so to not jump off from the point of the experience of the citizens who spent all this time, right, doing as was requested in all the literature that was put out. I guess I was just surprised, but I'm glad to hear that there's going to be further consideration and documentation produced for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And our next speaker is Allie Gaylord, followed by Sierra Lubiter. Allie, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, and thanks for holding this session tonight. And I also wanted to just echo that I had the same confusion that a lot of the council members and public have shared, that I thought that the consultants would be kind of distilling themes from the public's maps and the community of interest forms, rather than kind of just putting all the maps up equally and kind of running through them so quickly. So I also wanted to say I just really appreciate the dedication to the further meetings and discussion around this. This is a really important and difficult exercise, and so I really appreciate the commitment to the future meetings and additional background. I did want to specifically address a comment that was made by Councilmember Barnacle and question posed by Councilmember McDonald, that I support including both sides of East Washington as a district rather than kind of using East Washington as a dividing line. I think using East Washington as a dividing line is kind of easy and quite easy to visually see. But, it really resonated with me when Councilmember Barnacle said, you could be standing on one side of your street and then kind of wondering, why did that pothole on the other side of the street get fixed? Or why did that side of the street get a bike lane and this side didn't, for example? So I really think that kind of using a corridor methodology to define a neighborhood or community of interest is an important idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Allie. Our next speaker is Sierra Luber. Sierra, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you so much, everybody, for this evening and all of your hard work. I just wanted to, again, say that as far as looking at the 3 different city draft plans, I just want to say I'm also in agreement that Plan A, just on kind of first look, initial look, is the one I'm favoring as well. I wanted to also say, as the previous speaker said, that with the District E and Plan A, I actually agree. I liked the way that it crossed the freeway, kind of keeping communities of interest together there. I also wanted to, I really agree, and I know that this doesn't apply in this case, but I really appreciated Zaira's comments on the community advisory committee for future redistricting. So I just wanted to uplift that for future. And then I also wanted to echo the rest of the council members on as far as getting the same layout or same format and demographic data with the public submissions, because I actually did find them online, the public submissions, but I would like to see them in the same format with the same data as the city draft plans as well. I think that's it for now. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, Sierra. The next speaker is Jason Stewart. Jason, you may unmute and begin your comments. Are you there, Jason? Okay, go ahead. Jason seems to have left. Sorry about that. Madam Mayor, that's the last hand we have raised.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll be closing public comment on this item. But if there are council members who would like to ask follow-up questions of people who submitted maps, please, I hope the people in the public will stay attached so that that could happen. Okay, I did hear a question about submittal deadline for maps, and I know that the original date was the 24th of January, but then there was a problem with the website. So could I ask staff to please respond when is that time closed? And if it is, people who have ideas about this, what are they able to submit anything or just speak at these meetings?
I'll speak up, Madam Mayor. This is Ingrid.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's my understanding, and if one of the attorneys can correct me, but I believe that we'll be accepting community input up through the adoption of the map, that we're required to continue to accept input. When we did the community outreach, the reason why we asked people to submit maps by that deadline was we wanted as much community input to filter into what work Redistricting Partners did. So that way they would have the benefit of the bulk of the maps in time for preparing the draft maps. That was the thinking there.
Okay.
So could I add to that, Madam Mayor? Unless you had a follow-up.
No, I don't have a follow-up. I just couldn't see you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So we will certainly continue this. There's going to be, we'll be receiving public comment on this up until the council gives the districting ordinance a second reading, adopting it, which has to happen at the very latest by April 4th. That would involve us using the backup meeting that we talked about reserving and not necessarily relying on in accordance with the direction of Councilmember King and I think some other members, and also the desire of staff to have a bit of a safety net. But in terms of the maps themselves, there's a couple considerations. One is if any map that's new or amended has to be published and available to the public 7 days before the hearing it's acted upon, which it's acted upon. And on our timetable, which unfortunately is quite constrained, as several folks have mentioned tonight, we're currently planning on introducing the districting ordinance, that is giving it its first reading on March 7th, and then adopting it on March 14th, which that would leave us the April 14th as a backup. But the key thing I want to emphasize is once the ordinance is introduced, if that action is changed substantively, it needs to be reintroduced. So we won't be able to continue to receive new maps after the cutoff, the 7-day cutoff of publication prior to the council action on the map as we get close to the end. The other thing I don't know the answer to, and we may need Liz's help with this is it's not just a question of getting a map. It's, we've heard the council tonight, rightly so, members of the public too, indicating to assess maps from members of the public, we need to have the same, demographic information, make sure that they balance in terms of the voting age populations in each of the districts. So, and I don't know what that time frame is like, Liz, but we need to factor that in too, I think.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying that in order for any maps other than A, B, and C to be considered, not only do they have to be available to the public on the 28th or by the 28th of February at the latest, they also have to have this other work done to them in order so that we're looking at the apples and apples. Is that correct?
Yes, at least so we know it would be lawful to adopt them. But I think more than that, Madam Mayor, I think the council and the public need a chance to look at those factors we just talked about so that they can decide, whether they favor it or not, or if not, what parts of it they do.
Okay, so ideally, as the council moves forward in discussing this, it's sounding to me like Plan C that was suggested by the consultant is seeming to fall out. But I could be premature in saying that. But if there are other iterations or maps that people would like us to look at or discuss further tonight that aren't just A and B, maybe we can continue to have that conversation and ask the kinds of questions that we would like to get answered to see whether or not we can bring that into the group that we want to look into. That might be premature at this point, though. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Councilmember Fisher, followed by Councilmember Healy.
So following up on this discussion then for our city attorney, do you have sort of a deadline then for the community to expect that that's the last that they can start submitting maps to have time to create the data that we need when we look at those maps?
Well, I don't have I was close to sort of estimating one with potentially Liz's help, but it seems to me that if we're to introduce the district map on March 7th, and we need to publish 7 days before that, and we need a little processing time to publish along with the information for folks to assess it. That would suggest, let's see.
Eric, can we have Elizabeth weigh in on this because she's the one who has to process these? So I'm just
Absolutely.
We know what the legal parameters are. I'm just curious.
Because it's looking like sometime around the end of, anyway, go ahead, Liz.
So it's fairly simple for us to convert the shapefile into these atlases, which will give us all the data we need. So as long as we get it, at the end of the day, 8 days before the last meeting, we'll be able to churn that out for you all. That being said, I've been working with Ingrid to make sure that I have all of the shape files. So she's sending them to me as they come in. So while that, the last week, 8 days before the last hearing might be the drop dead deadline, we are continuously updating as they come in. So, and that being said, highly encourage the public to get your maps in sooner rather than later, because this is a pretty quick transition to districted elections.
Thank you. And then can I ask for clarification, Mayor? So Ingrid, you just said that the public maps were asked to be submitted by a certain period of time so that the consultant could then weigh that information along with the communities of interest in order to come up with their maps A, B, and C. But I thought what I heard from you, Elizabeth, earlier was that you didn't take those public maps into consideration.
So we received a lot of maps, and we didn't want to cherry pick any of the maps and select one without the city council selecting those maps. So we want those maps to stand on their own. There are some very good ones in there. So we will let you decide on which maps you think best represent the community.
Okay, and to do that, then we need the demographic information and everything. So you're going to be adding that in and making that public on the website for everybody so that we can be checking that and looking at those? Is that how the process is going to work?
Yes, and I know that the staff already have that data, but I'm happy to keep sending these atlases, updating more regularly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Healy, followed by Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you. So I guess I think this has been a good meeting. I think we've narrowed down the consultant choices to one or possibly two. I think I heard a consensus, emerging consensus for A, but maybe B is still in the mix. And it seems to me that the February 14 meeting, once we have the demographic information on the maps submitted by the public, that's our opportunity to see if there are any there that pique our interest enough to try to elevate one of those. My question to the city attorney on that, though, is in order to the 7-day publication rule before the meeting where a map is adopted initially, does that mean we have to narrow it down to 7 days before then, or can we have 2 or 3 or 4 still on the table and one of those gets selected at the meeting?
I'll ask Tom to weigh in if I get any of this wrong or he wants to clarify or amplify, but the deadline is just a publication deadline. So we can have, I believe we can have multiple maps under consideration by the council. I think the key is so that there's no surprises for the public and they have the ability to fully participate. And in terms of the time frame, that's, you know, it's looking to me like sometime the last week in February, if we're going to stick to an introduction on the 7th and adoption on the 14th, and maybe we're going to go beyond that up to the April 4th meeting. I think we should try to pin that down tonight if we can, but based on what Liz is coming and looking at the dates, that's when it looks to me like we need to have gotten maps.
Thank you. And then just one final comment, if I may, Madam Mayor. There's been discussion about the issue of sequencing coming at the back end of this process as a becoming attraction. And I guess I'd like to know what we can be told about sequencing sooner rather than later. If we can get a memo on that, as opposed to just waiting to the end on that, because that may influence how or which redistricting plan we want to adopt. And if there are legal parameters on that, I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Quick question for the city attorney. Have we heard an update on Santa Monica's case?
I have no word that with respect to that case. I'll double check and be happy to let the council and the public know, but I don't think there's any developments.
Great. I think thanks for the people who were encouraging us not to move the district elections. I think it would be helpful to continue to reiterate where we stand in terms of the likelihood that we could actually prevail in any sort of a case, and just the magnitude of fees that those who have tried are obligated to pay. So for me, I'll break this down into 3 sets of comments. One, I think I need more shape files on the online versions of the maps so that I can see the location of schools and flood zones and parks and ideally collision data, but other things too that you think are there. To me, that's what is missing. Like we're doing, you know, streets right now. It's mainly streets, is from what I can tell, and I would like to identify if there are other factors, because transportation isn't the only issue that people are concerned about in this town. So that's one that I'm hoping we can get sooner rather than later, just so that we can all come in with a more informed opinion about other factors. The second thing is the communities of interest forums. I have not been able to find those, but I feel like we need to have a synthesis or something of like, here are the things that we found, more so than, you know, like the one sentence on the slide that we got about different areas, and really kind of give us more there, or even just give it, you know, redacted copies of all the COIs or something. But I think that's important for helping to identify the broad issues, and then ultimately getting down to the unique perspectives on those issues. Because again, this feels like we're just drawing geographic boundaries right now, and I really think that we need to try and identify issues that people have that are where they share common interest. And then the final piece, the speaker, Mr. Recusson, brought it up, just talking about how this is implemented, and Councilmember Healy just brought it as well. I would like to get some insights at the next meeting on how we plan to move forward. I know for me, if we're going to pick 3 districts, then the point is to give districts representation. The first 3 districts should be the 3 districts that have not had representation in the longest amount of time. I think that's a principle that I feel comfortable with, but I would like to get that. And in addition to thinking through things like, you know, the reporting out on of investments and things like that. You know, maybe that's down the road, but it's an interesting point that he raised. So, yeah, and maybe when we get the other shape files added, we can, you know, message that out to the community that there's been other data provided, and, you know, you can do deeper analysis on the existing maps. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember King, followed by Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few additional comments from my earlier ones. I'm in agreement. I did not hear any support for Plan C from the public, from council. So this is going to be complex and difficult enough. And if we can narrow kind of things down a little bit, I agree with that. Just eliminating it. And I would say that given some of the confusion over whether additional maps, more public input is still being able to be received prior to this meeting, some additional public outreach, particularly you know, in the same forums. I was impressed by the depth of the public outreach that was made by the city through all the different avenues, and I think that we're going to need to do that again, because I do think, quite frankly, I was under the impression that you could not submit a map at this point, and that point was about a week ago. So I'm going to have to go back and tell people that have asked that they can, and so I hope the city can do the same. I think there was a question from Recusson at the very beginning about the districts, and I can be corrected by city attorney, but this is basically the division is only for purposes of representation on the council. There's not going to be special tax districts in these 6 districts or anything else that was questioned. So I just want, that was a good question. I'm sure it's not the only one that has that. I wanted to give him an answer. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments, you know, about the dividing line where, you know, across the street, there's one district and the other. Another way to look at it, and there's probably no solid way to look at something like that, is if you have a neighborhood problem and the neighborhood is at the dividing point, one advantage, for what it's worth, that you might have is that you'll have 2 district representatives as opposed to 1 to go to. In other words, if there's a pothole in the middle of the street and one side of the street is in District A and the other one's in District B, well, the neighbors can get together and maybe talk to 2 instead of 1 if they want to just talk to their district representative. And as I said earlier, I'm hopeful, you know, in the future, as a resident of the city of Petaluma, that all 6 council members, no matter where they reside, are responsive to everybody in this city. And as a voice from the past that will be talking to you in the future. I hope you have that in mind, because the city is not going to run as well as if we. It's one thing to vote in districts. It's another thing to only represent the districts. I have confidence that the people that get elected won't do that. And one public safety announcement. Our next meeting on this is on February 14th. For those of you who are not good at remembering things, that is St. Valentine's Day. So if you're going to be here, take care of all your Valentine's business the weekend before. That's my plan, and I would recommend it highly for those of you who want to exist on February 15th. Thank you.
Thank you for that public safety announcement. So we will move on to Councilmember McDonald.
I put on the serious face right after that. Thanks for the reminder. I would like to continue some of that council members' comments about the joining the district elections process. I don't think the council voted to do this because it was a idea whose time had come. It was, as Councilman Barnacle pointed out, just kind of thrust upon us with great risk of financial loss. And so I think we're embracing it for its intended goods, though the path we got here might not be the path we wanted to get here on. And our speaker, Alex DeCarly, mentioned some of these things. And I just have to say, since all 6 of the council members live within 2 districts, no matter how you slice it and dice it, of all the plans we've seen, it is unlikely that any of the council people whose terms terminate this year will have a district to run in. So this is a real call to action for, like Councilman Barnacle mentioned, the districts who do not have representatives currently on this council. There will be a wholesale change, and now's the time to engage and come to grips with that idea. And so, I mean, people have asked me, well, why don't we have 3 districts with 2 representatives? Or, there's so many ways of not quite getting to the finish line we need to get to. I'm glad that the public is giving such attention to, and the council too, the district possibilities. Looking at, I'm assuming all the council will be looking very seriously at all the public submittals that come in and all the demographic data that goes with them. So I think that's just where we are on this matter. Regarding the options put on the table from the consultant today, I suggest we focus on A alone and craft from that. And if the consultant could kind of help with that effort and recraft A a little bit to take in some of the comments we heard tonight, I think that would put together one of those as a better map for our consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy, followed by Vice Mayor Posake.
Thank you. I was just going to make one brief comment because I've already had one shot at this, but this is kind of following on Councilmember Barnacle's comments in terms of sequencing, and I think this just underscores the need to get that information sooner rather than later. But let's say hypothetically we were to adopt Plan A, and the 2 districts within Plan A that have the highest Hispanic proportion of population are B and E. And there's no current council member in either of those. There have been in the past, but not well within my tenure on the council, certainly. But would we be doing folks a favor by putting those on the cycle in the non-presidential election year rather than having at least one of them wait to the presidential cycle? Because that will repeat going forward every 4 years into the indefinite future. When low propensity voters are going to turn out in much higher numbers in presidential election year. So it's just another thought. I'm not advocating for anything. It's just another thing to be thinking about. Thank you.
No, and I actually appreciate your bringing that up, Councilmember Healy, because I do think it is important, because going into district elections, we have to remember that people will only be voting once every 4 years, especially if the mayor is in that same cycle. And I know that this would take a general no, not a general plan amendment, but a charter amendment. But, in terms of having everybody having an equal shot at voting for the mayor, we might want to really look at voting for our mayor every 2 years instead of every 4 years, so that, we actually make sure that everybody comes to the ballot and is equally participating. Because I really do think, in the same idea that has been sort of generally spoken about sequencing, that you can affect outcomes by how things are sequenced. So with that, I'll wait for the staff report on that. So Vice Mayor Kosake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to support two comments already made. One is that I also believe that we pretty much eliminated maps B and C of the three presented to us tonight. And I think by limiting further discussion of those to map A, that opens up more thought being given to some of the citizen generated maps. Second thing is that I also support the idea of getting regular updates on what's going on in Santa Monica, just on the off chance that something changes in this regard. Thanks.
Thank you. And for those in the public who aren't aware of the references to Santa Monica, the city of Santa Monica is suing not to go to district elections because they feel that their communities of interest are pretty evenly dispersed throughout their community, and that going to district elections would not affect the outcome. So we are waiting to hear what everybody is waiting to hear what the outcome has been, but it seems to be moving very slowly. So we will have to be moving forward on this issue independent of what happens in Santa Monica. So thank you. And I'm going to go to Councilmember Fisher. I want to finish the council members before I go to staff or the consultant.
Thank you. Just one last question, since it seems like most of us were in favor of A. Is it possible to get this in a format that we can manipulate it? So I mentioned, that I thought the Corona station should actually be an E and not D. Is there a way to provide that map A for the public and for us to sort of play with boundaries and that sort of thing?
So I believe they have the ability to do that on the map drawing tool. So they can absolutely adjust the boundaries using the Esri tool. That being said, at the next hearing, if we want to do live drawing where it is just moving the boundary, a couple of streets or a block or whatever, we can absolutely do that and see it all together on what the impact would be. That could easily be done.
So how would I go about using the mapping tool, already having map A in the tool?
Go ahead, Ingrid.
Thanks.
So what we can do is we can take map A and we can upload it to the tool and make it one of the shared maps that then when you log in, you can go and search for shared maps, and we can title it Plan A. We'll have to, and we can also post for the map tool, you have to go in and find the map. So we'll have to post the name of the map so you can find it. But we can definitely do that. And then you can go from that map and manipulate it. Like start there as a baseline,
right?
Manipulate from there.
Okay, and then will you be uploading the public maps into that same shared portal or no?
The public maps are in the submitted portal. They're only shared if the person who submitted the map chose to share it.
Oh.
So there are shared maps, and there are ways to have groups of people working on a map. It's just a little more technically involved. So we could do more. It might be a good idea to do another workshop with the S3 staff on, training the intricacies of getting into existing maps and manipulating them, because it just gets a little more trickier.
Okay, and if somebody submitted a map but it wasn't a shared map, can they go back in and make it a shared map?
That I don't know. I'll have to look, but understanding the goal, I will definitely check in with our GIS manager and see what's possible.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I was going to say that the suggestion that, or the request that Councilmember Fisher had, and I believe Ms. Gator Thompson had as well, about moving the Corona Station site into the E, is exceedingly simple to do. All they need to do is move the boundary in that segment from North McDowell to the railroad tracks. That piece of land has a population of 0, so it doesn't affect anything, and it solves that problem. Thanks.
Okay, so before we go, I'd like to just weigh in with on these issues. Actually, council has made it very easy for me to take a straw poll because everybody seemed to weigh in on preferring A to either of the other submittals by the consultant. And if I have that wrong, council member, raise your hand now. Okay, so the other thing that I think none of us feels comfortable saying is what we think about the public submittals, you know, because we don't really have the same information about them. And I think the question that Councilmember Fisher just brought up about, you know, are these accessible to us in a way that we could play around with them and do this work? I don't think it should be done at another hands-on public live workshop. I think this should be something that is submitted to us as perhaps an early packet that can be added to as we get more information with a cutoff date, so that we can look at these and have information so that when we come into our next workshop, we are, you know, down the road a bit. We're not just starting at, well, you know, we've got these 5 that we like, but we, you know, we settled pretty quickly on A. We'll get down to the details in the next workshop. That's where it's going to slow down a whole lot. And I do think Councilmember Fisher's idea, and that we heard echoed in the public comment, and Councilmember Healy just agreed to, about moving the smart station into that E district. You know, I think most of us would agree with the logic there. But that was also brought up, I think it was by former council member Kater Thompson, that maybe the Lagunitas site should be brought into that as well. You know, that's something that we might want to chew on before our workshop, so that, you know, if we can be looking at some of these issues that we have heard from the public, and now we want to get them, but we need that information sent to us in a public record sort of way, so that we have that information as our packet to work for the next workshop, and the public is aware of that information as well, and has access to the tools of changing things, because I think doing it at the meeting never seems to be as positive as doing it ahead of time. So with that, I will go back to our consultant and ask if she'd like to make a comment, because you had your hand up earlier.
I did, and this goes back to sequencing. I believe it was Council Member Healy who brought up potentially voter turnout. We have the ability to look up voter turnout from the whole city or subgroups. So if that's something you want us to bring forward, with an analysis of voter turnout during presidential years, voter turnout during midterms, that might be helpful in other cities where we're helping with CVRA districting. They have also requested similar information. So that's sort of helped them through the process.
Well, I would support that, and I think that it eliminates some guesswork, and it gives us real data. So that's always a positive. Okay, Councilmember King.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to follow up on following up on your comment, Madam Mayor, about 2-year terms for mayors, and I don't have a view on that right now, but I'm wondering if that's something that can be done in this process or not. And I see Eric shaking his head no. I'm interpreting that correctly.
Right. No, the charter amendment process under a council-sponsored amendment, it's at least a 6-month process. We don't have nearly that time right now. So those things that require a charter change won't be able to be accomplished as part of the current districting transition.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Fisher.
All right, in the beginning of this process, though, we did talk about all the things that we probably want to change in our charter because of this districting. So when it comes to our goal setting, we probably want to discuss making that perhaps more of a priority this year.
Thank you. We have our goals setting coming up in March. So put that in your notes to yourself. Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
And just to note that I think we're finding the unintended consequences to this transition. And I think it may have been you who pointed out that currently Petalumans are very engaged. They vote every 2 years, and they're always paying attention to who their leadership is. And in the future, they'll vote every 4 years. And that makes it harder to stay engaged in your local leadership. And it's just one of the consequences to make, this decision we're backing into. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else on the council or staff that would like to comment on where we are? I'm not seeing any hands go up. So I will say then, I think we're still on track for a meeting on the 14th of February. And staff will make an effort to get the information from the public to us in a way that maybe is manipulable or manipulatable. And if not, and also providing us with the kind of data background that plans A, B, and C had for the census data. And then Councilmember Barnacle also asked for other layers of information, such as schools and playgrounds or parks, that I thought I heard staff say was an easy overlay. And then I guess, the other floodway information is more historical and probably will be having to be taken from what is current and available, as opposed to predictive. And then you asked for the COI forms, information that could come from them, if there's anything in those that we could be reading as a little bit of background information for how people identified their own communities of interest. So is that something staff can do? Is that, yes, okay, I'm seeing Ingrid nod. So that's a good thing. But I have a question, and the answer is probably no, we have to go with the information we have. But there are some districts that right now our council goals are for infill and density, so that it's probably very likely that some of the more downtown and center districts, as imagined, are going to be ones where there will be more development, and so their population will increase probably higher than ones out on the urban separator. Is that something we can take into consideration now, or do we have to just base it on what the census tracts are as of the 2020 census, which is what I think is the answer?
Tom, is that something you can help us address?
I think Liz is.
You got that, Liz? Thanks.
Yeah, and Tom could add anything to this. First and foremost, we're looking at the 2020 census data. We're obligated to use that under law and Supreme Court precedent. But that being said, there is a 10% deviation. So if you know that there is potential growth, and you've already factored in all of the other guidelines and principles in the districting process, then you can certainly consider that. But keep in mind that it's hard to predict growth. You know, I trust your judgment. You know this city better than anyone else in the world. So up to you, but there are some caveats.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I thought, but I thought I'd ask. All right. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for all your work. And you know, thank you people in the audience who submitted maps already. And I think I would extend to you the invitation that if you have something you want to say about your map, I would suggest you send in something written to the city clerk so that she can make that part of the agenda packet that's going to be coming to us as we're going to be now looking at all the submittals that we haven't looked at, or look at them more in depth. So thank you on that. And with that, I guess we have now general public comment. So this is for items not on today's agenda. And I will ask our interim city clerk if she's received any general public comment on items not on today's agenda.
Madam Mayor, we received 9 general comments that have been posted to the website.
Thank you very much. And so now I'll ask our moderator, Patrick Carter, if there's anybody in attendance who would like to speak on items that are not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In a second, I will start a 30-second timer that will, at the end of which we will count out how many hands we have raised and divide the time accordingly. So without any further ado, members of the public wishing to speak on items not on the current agenda, please raise your hand now and you'll be called on in turn. Attendees will be muted when their time expires or when their comments have concluded, whichever comes first. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. And if you're unable to speak during the time allotted, please send your comments to cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. And we have one hand raised, so I will reset the timer to 3 minutes. And ask recusant to unmute and begin the comments.
Thank you. And this is just a follow-up on my previous question. A couple council members called it out, and it is something that I think is important just for the public to know. And if this is already posted somewhere, you know, that's my apologies for not kind of interpreting this before. But when we do move to district elections, which I understand kind of the necessity, I appreciate the background on Santa Monica and the precedent that kind of pushes us in this direction. But does it necessitate any other changes other than electing representation? And I know a couple of other public commenters before expressed too that concept of, you know, who decides who fixes potholes? How is that money kind of spread between the districts? Is that not really a consideration? You know, is the general fund where expenses come from? The districts don't play into that. So I would just reiterate that question. And then I also just wanted to confirm, just going over some of the financial reports for year ended June 2021, specifically with the general fund. You know, it looked like there was some draws out of the fund. It looked like the budgeted draws at the beginning of the year, I believe, were about 1.4 million. That by the end of the year, we're about somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 million. And at the end of the year, the actuals were 7.8 million. And I don't know, you know, it looks like on a standard balance sheet, that would just be kind of an equity draw on the account. So I'm just seeing if we can get more visibility on some of the items like that in the financials. And if that's just someone within the city departments that we can kind of direct those questions to, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And that was the last hand raised before the timer expired. I'm sorry for the people that still have their hands raised. Please submit your comments to the email address on the screen, cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I will I will ask our yes, our city attorney has his hand up. So because district elections are so new, I think it is probably a value to our community to respond to the question of, does it change anything else about our city except where people vote?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it please you and the council, I will address that, and I'll be following on Councilmember King's accurate initial responses on the same topic. So all this change under the districting transition is how council members are selected and what members of the public select them and in what order. The city government is still the city government. The budget is still the budget. The municipal code is still the municipal code. The charter is still the charter. It applies to the entire corporate boundaries of the city, and to our extraterritorial property, like the Lafferty wildland property. The council members will still be fiduciaries of the entire municipal corporations. They will still have those duties to every single citizen, every single community member, not just those in their district. Our budget is going to be structured the way it's been structured and evolved the way it's planned to evolve to make it more useful and more accessible and more transparent. So none of those other things change. That's not to downplay the significant change that the district transition represents, but those other things that Mr. Rakusin mentioned, none of them will be affected by the districting transition. What will change is the way council members are selected, who selects them, and how campaigning works. Will have corresponding changes because candidates will be focusing on those becoming known by and supported by those in their district who will be choosing their representative. So hopefully that answers the question. If there are more council questions, I'll be happy to do my best to answer those, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I would just add that budget questions are difficult to answer in this context, but we are getting our new budget at the beginning of May. So if you'd like to stay around for that, that would probably give you a good introduction to how our city is run and what gets paid for out of what accounts, and how we plan for the future for our infrastructure and maintenance of our city, which luckily we've been able to do at a much better rate with the passage of Measure U. So, okay, so with that, if there's no other comments from council members or staff, we're going to adjourn this workshop, and we will be back in February 14th for the next workshop on district elections. So good evening.
Thank you. Good night all.